The forest was eerily quiet that evening, the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. I had been hiking for hours, trying to clear my head after a particularly grueling week at work. The dense woods were my sanctuary, a place where I could escape the noise of the city and just breathe. But that night, the forest felt different, charged, as if the air itself was alive with electricity. I was about to turn back when I heard it. A faint, almost melodic groan, like the sound of wind chimes caught in a storm. My instincts screamed at me to run, but curiosity got the better of me. I followed the sound, pushing through thick underbrush until I stumbled into a small clearing. There, lying in a crumpled heap, was the most extraordinary creature I had ever seen. At first glance, she looked almost human, slender with long, flowing hair that shimmered like liquid silver. But as I approached, I noticed the subtle differences. Her skin had a faint, iridescent glow, her ears were slightly pointed, and her eyes, when they fluttered open, were a mesmerizing shade of violet, with pupils that seemed to shift and swirl like galaxies. She was injured. A deep gash ran along her side, and her breathing was labored. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. She wasn't human, but she was clearly in pain. I couldn't just leave her there. "Hey," I said softly, crouching down beside her. "Can you understand me?" Her eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, I felt like she was peering into my very soul. Then she nodded weakly. "I'm going to help you, okay?" I said, more to reassure myself than her. I shrugged off my backpack and pulled out my first aid kit. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. As I cleaned and bandaged her wound, I couldn't help but marvel at her. Her skin was warm to the touch, and it seemed to pulse faintly, as if it had a life of its own. She watched me intently, her expression unreadable, but there was a softness in her eyes that put me at ease. When I was done, she reached out and placed a hand on my arm. Her touch sent a jolt of energy through me, and for a moment I felt a strange connection, as if we were somehow linked. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice like a melody. "I am Lyra." "I'm Jack," I replied, still reeling from the sensation. What are you doing here?" She hesitated, then said, "I was fleeing. My ship was attacked and I crashed here. I need to find a way back to my people." I nodded, though my mind was racing. An alien. An actual alien. And she was here, in front of me, trusting me to help her. "I'll do what I can," I said. "But we need to get you somewhere safe first." I helped her to her feet, and though she was unsteady, she leaned on me as we made our way back to my cabin. It was a small, rustic place, but it was warm and dry, and it would have to do for now. Over the next few days, I tended to Lyra's wounds and did my best to make her comfortable. She was a fast healer, and by the third day, she was able to move around on her own. We spent hours talking, and I learned more about her world and her people. They were a peaceful race, explorers who traveled the stars in search of knowledge and understanding. But they were not without enemies, and it was one of these enemies that had attacked her ship. As the days turned into weeks, something began to change between us. There was a growing bond, a connection that went beyond words. I found myself drawn to her in a way I couldn't explain, and I could tell she felt it too. It was as if we were two halves of the same whole, destined to find each other. One evening, as we sat by the fire, Lyra turned to me and said, "Jack, there is something I must tell you." I looked at her, my heart pounding. "What is it?" She took a deep breath. "Among my people, when we find someone who completes us, who makes us feel whole, we form a bond. It is called the Lyra, the joining of souls. It is rare, and it is forever." I stared at her, my mind racing. "Are you saying?" She nodded. "You are my Lyra, Jack. We mate. My soul is bound to yours." I was speechless. This was beyond anything I had ever imagined. But as I looked into her eyes, I knew it was true. I felt it in every fiber of my being. "Lyra," I said, my voice trembling. "I don't know what to say. This is incredible. But I'm just a human. How can I be your mate?" She smiled, a radiant, otherworldly smile. "It is not about what you are but who you are. Your soul called to mine and mine answered. That is all that matters." I reached out and took her hand, and once again I felt that electric connection, that sense of completeness. "Then I accept," I said. "I accept you as my mate." Her eyes filled with tears, and she leaned in, pressing her lips to mine. It was a kiss unlike any I had ever experienced, filled with warmth and light and a sense of belonging that I had never known. From that moment on, we were inseparable. Lyra's wound healed completely, and she regained her strength. But she chose to stay with me, in my little cabin in the woods. We built a life together, a life that was simple but filled with love and wonder. But our peace was not to last. One night, as we lay in each other's arms, a bright light filled the sky, and a low hum reverberated through the air. Lyra sat up, her eyes wide with fear. "They've found me," she whispered. I held her tightly. "Who?" "Your people." She shook her head. "No. The ones who attacked my ship. They've come to finish what they started." I felt a surge of protectiveness. "I won't let them take you." She looked at me, her eyes filled with sorrow. "You don't understand, Jack. They are powerful. They will not stop until they have me, or until they destroy everything in their path." I clenched my fists. "Then we'll fight. Together." She smiled sadly. "You are brave, my mate. But this is not your battle." Before I could argue, the door to the cabin burst open, and 3 figures stepped inside. They were tall and imposing, with dark metallic armor that seemed to absorb the light. Their faces were hidden behind masks, but I could feel their cold, calculating gaze. "Lyra of the Starfall clan," one of them said, his voice like grinding stone. "You are to come with us." Lyra stood, her chin held high. "I will not go with you. I have found my Kylara, and I will not leave him." The leader of the group tilted his head, as if considering her words. Then he raised a hand, and a beam of energy shot out, striking Lyra and sending her crashing to the ground. I roared in anger and charged at him, but he simply flicked his wrist, and I was thrown across the room, slamming into the wall. Pain exploded through my body, but I forced myself to stand. "You will not take her," I growled. The leader stepped forward, his hand glowing with energy. "You are insignificant, human. Do not interfere in matters beyond your understanding." I clenched my fists, ready to fight to the death if I had to. But before I could move, Lyra's voice rang out. "Enough!" She rose to her feet, her body glowing with a brilliant light. Her eyes blazed with power, and the air around her crackled with energy. "You will not harm him," she said, her voice echoing with authority. "I am Lyra of the Starfall clan, and I will not be taken." The leader hesitated, then said, "You cannot defeat us, Lyra. Surrender, and we will spare the human." She shook her head. "I will never surrender." With that, she unleashed a burst of energy that filled the room, blinding.